Okay, I tried to hit pause and I hit stop. So we're gonna have to break up the lectures into part 1 and part 2. So that was the one before was part 1 and this is part 2. Sorry about that. I'm sure there's a way that you could just combine them into one, but I don't really know how that works, so I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, so sorry. It's so rude to yawn in front of people, but since I don't fully feel like I'm in front of people, I'm more prone to be rude, and I'm very sorry. All right, so yes, Descartes is who we are talking about now. So if you recall from last time, he's kind of in a weird spot because he's doubted everything he can possibly doubt in the first meditation. So, like I kind of talked about, he has torn down his foundation of belief, and now he has to rebuild it. Because at the end of meditation 1, it's like, oh my gosh, all beliefs have been demolished. What are we going to do? So, in the rest of the meditations, he has to build it back up. Oh, sorry, I suck. Meditation 2 is titled The Nature of the Human Mind and How It is Better Known Than the Body. So this obviously has a lot to do with the mind, so that's why it is one of our selections. So Descartes reminds us once again of the kind of rule he's operating under, that anything which admits the slightest doubt he will set aside and consider it to be false. So he's just using, if he's able to doubt it, he's not going to accept it. So he's not going to trust his memory. He's kind of putting everything he used to believe away, and he's going to focus on what he can prove from what he knows to be true. So it seems to him that there is something that he would call I. So there's some sort of me that exists. So would that be a body with senses? No, because he's already explained the sensory deception argument, so it can't be that. So, since nothing exists, what is this I? What is this me? And he concludes that after considering everything very thoroughly, I must finally conclude that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. So he knows that there is something going on, there's something happening that he can trust, that I exist in some sense. He doesn't know what that means yet. That could really mean anything. Like he says, just following, I do not have a sufficient understanding of what this I is that necessarily exists, but there is something. And the reason he knows that is because he's having these thoughts. There's something that exists. So he uses the subtractive thought experiment, which is that he will subtract anything capable of being weakened, even minimally, by the arguments now introduced, so that what is left at the end may be exactly and only what is certain and unshakable. So subtracting everything that he is unsure of and ending with truth, hopefully, is the goal. So he considers that it seems that he has a face and arms and a whole corpse, and that he was engaging in sense perception and all these things. So the face and hands and everything he considered to be part of the body, and then sense perception and thinking he contributed to the soul, but he doesn't know that these are two distinct things yet. He doesn't know the nature of them. So he can't really say that yet. He does say that by a body, he means whatever has a determinable shape and a definable location and can occupy a space in such a way as to exclude any other body. So that's just good to know. His definition of body is something with a shape, a location, and that occupies space. So then he considers, once again, the malicious demon, or the evil demon. So he knows, okay, the attributes that he attributed to the body and the soul, he can't really trust. So then he says, at last I have discovered it. Thought. Thought is the thing. Thought, this alone is inseparable from me. So the only thing he knows to be inseparable of the I, or the me, is thinking or thought. And he says, for how long? For as long as I am thinking. For it could be that were I totally to cease from thinking, I should totally cease to exist. So if he stopped thinking at that moment, nothing would exist. So that's kind of his conclusion here from the first meditation, that the only thing he can know to be sure is that he exists and that he is a thinking thing. So humans are thinking things. Okay. So he knows that he exists, still kind of trying to figure out what the I is, except that we know it is at least thought. And then he also acknowledges that not only does I consist of thought, but it consists of some sort of perception. So it could be the case that me perceiving this pen, it could be the case that this pen is not real. But even if this pen is not real, it doesn't change the fact that I'm perceiving something that seems to be a pen. I'm still having this sensation right now. Nothing really changes that, whether it's real or not. It's just the case. It seems to me that I'm seeing something. That it's a weak statement to say, because you're not saying this exists. You're just saying, I'm having some sort of experience that's making me see this thing in front of me. Don't know if it exists. Don't know if I can trust my senses, but I'm experiencing something here. So, that shows that he's a thinking thing that has some sense experience, whether it's real or not. So, what is he? He is a thing that thinks. And what is that? That is a thing that doubts, understands, affirms, denies, is willing, is unwilling, and also imagines and has sensory perceptions. So, let's kind of change the angle here, and we have a few things that thinking is. So thinking isn't just like, I don't know, like I'm thinking about what I'm gonna have for lunch tomorrow or something. It kind of includes a lot more than we might originally think. So thinking includes doubts, understanding, affirming, denying, willing. So willing yourself to do something, convincing yourself to get out of bed in the morning to go run or something like that, that counts as thinking. And imagination / perception. So, Yeah. So even sense perception is considered to be a thought because it's happening in your brain in a weird way. So the fact that this exists or something like that has nothing to do with my thoughts. But me perceiving it does have to do with my thoughts. It's a thought of mine. Yeah. So then we have he says that the I who imagines is the same I as the one that thinks. So he once again clarifies that he could be asleep and all the perceptions could be false, but he certainly seems to see, to hear, to feel warm, and that cannot be false. And that is all that having a sense perception is. It is this restricted sense of the term that is just simply thinking, another form of thinking. So, then he kind of shifts gears a little bit and starts talking about a piece of wax. This is because he wants to understand bodies or material things. The things that it seems that people most commonly think they understand. So typically I would think, yeah, I understand this pen. I understand there's just this certain shape. It writes, does this certain thing. It's a certain color. All these things seems very vivid to me. I think I know all of those things. So he wants to kind of break that down. So he takes the example of a piece of wax. So it's just been taken from the honeycomb. It still has the taste of honey, the scent of the flowers from which it was gathered. It has a certain color, shape, and size that are all plain to see. It's hard, cold, can be handled without difficulty. If you hit it with your knuckle, it makes a sound. It seems that it has everything necessary for us to know what it is. But when you take this cold, hard piece of wax and put it near the fire, the taste is eliminated, the smell goes away, the color changes, the shape is lost, the size increases, it becomes a liquid rather than a solid, it becomes hot rather than cold. If you strike it with your knuckle, it no longer makes a sound. So everything that we thought we knew about this piece of wax has changed. So the question is it still the same piece of wax, even though everything we thought we needed to know in order to know the piece of wax is gone? He says yes, it's still the same thing. You would want to say, yes, that's the same piece of wax. You wouldn't want to say, no, it's a totally different piece of wax, even though it's like the same. So he needs to explain, okay, what makes the piece of wax itself? What is the essence of that piece of wax? It seems that none of the features of taste, smell, sight, touch, hearing, demonstrate its essence, because all of those things changed. So, he says, let us concentrate, take away everything which does not belong to the wax in our thought, and see what is left. So, once again, we're using the subtractive thought experiment, taking away everything that does not belong to the wax, subtracting it, and seeing what we have left. And so it's not going to be, you're not going to have taste, smell, sight, touch, hearing, any of those things. None of those things tell us what the wax is in essence, because they're all able to be changed while the wax remains the same. So all that we have left is that the wax is something that is extended, meaning that it occupies space. It occupies space. Flexible, that it's you can stretch it, everything like that, stretch it in different ways, and it's changeable. So it's mutable. You can change it from one thing to a different thing. You can change it from hot to cold, something like that. So then he kind of explains what flexible and changeable mean, which is what I kind of just said. Flexible meaning you could change its shape, and changeable meaning that there's, whoops, you can change it in an immeasurable number of ways. So all of those things you actually don't arrive at from sense perception. You arrive at it through reason. It is perceived by the mind alone. This is because you know that the wax is able to change shape or be stretched or something, because even though you can't physically stretch it in every possible way imaginable, you know that it's capable of being changed in all those different ways. Even though you can't change it in the immeasurable number of ways that it's able to be changed, you understand that it could be changed in all of those ways. And then extension, he says, I would not be making a correct judgment about the wax unless I believed it capable of being extended in many more different ways than I will ever encompass in my imagination. So he doesn't have to sense all of these things to know that the wax is extended, flexible, and changeable. So, it is a case of mental scrutiny. You are using your mind to determine the essence of the thing. Another example of this is if I look outside and I see a man walking. Is it the case that I actually see a man walking, or is it the case that I see what seems to be a hat and a coat and what looks to be little legs, and then I just judge that that's a man? So it could be the case that underneath the hat and underneath the coat and underneath the pants and everything, that it's just an automaton or like a robot. That could be the case. But whenever I look out, I don't think that. I think that's a man because I'm using my judgment. So I don't arrive at the conclusion that it's a man by my perception, because I'm not actually perceiving a man. I'm perceiving a certain figure with a hat, glasses, coat, whatever it may be. And then I use my brain, I use my thinking to judge that that is actually a man. It's not the case that I just immediately perceive a man. So that's another way that you're using judgment rather than perception to determine something. So he's telling us this, he's demonstrating this to show that we know our minds better than we know our bodies. Basically, our minds are much more evident to us than material things. He concludes by saying, I now know that even bodies are not strictly perceived by the senses or the faculty of imagination, but by the intellect alone, and that this perception derives not from their being touched or seen, but from their being understood. And in view of this, I know plainly that I can achieve an easier and more evident perception of my own mind than of anything else. But since the habit of holding on to old opinions cannot be set aside so quickly, I should like to stop here and meditate for some time on this new knowledge I've gained, so as to fix it more deeply in my memory. So basically, he just concludes by saying that we know bodies by way of thinking and of our mind, rather than by just like feeling or hearing or seeing. So that demonstrates that the mind is indeed separate from the body. Okay. That was kind of a lot, but I hope you get the main point that mind and body are distinct, and we can know our mind better than we can know bodies. Bodies not only meaning human bodies, but meaning material things of any kind. Okay, so on Thursday, we have a Zoom meeting. So please come with questions and all things that you want to talk about. That's a time set aside for discussion, being able to talk about things that you have questions about or things you want more clarity on, anything like that. So that'll be fun. Just be ready. All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.